G'day everyone, welcome back to the channel. If this is the first time you've been here, I recommend going back to episode 1 where I explain the nature of this project, who I am, where I am, why I'm doing it, etc. I'll put a link to episode 1 in the description below, or you can find it in the build playlist. I'd also recommend watching episode 2 before this one, as I will be talking about elements of and mistakes made in the previous chapter. Okay, so I'll talk you through the mistake I made. If you're a current or previous cozy builder, or possibly the builder of a long easy or some other variant, you may have noticed a mistake I made in the final part of chapter 5. First of all, I didn't forget to dish out the control stick depressions, as I plan on putting windows in this area anyway. The only reason I drew the circles is for a reference later on if I needed it. The actual mistake I made happened right about where the video is passing through now. It was only when I was editing all the footage for the previous episode that I noticed I'd forgotten to lay up the bid tape either side of the LWX and LWI stringers. Needless to say, there was a lot of swearing, a lot of head shaking, and a lot of frustration. How could I have missed such a simple step clearly written in the instructions? And how was I going to fix my mistake? So the next morning I was still pretty angry with myself, but I was scrolling through Facebook and I noticed that another builder had made exactly the same mistake I had, probably within 24 hours of me. So I sent him a message letting him know that he wasn't alone and I'd done the same thing. And he replied that he wondered how many other aircraft were flying around in the world with these missing bid tapes, and I agreed that there would likely be some. Fortunately for the other builder, he realised his mistake before laying up the 6 layers of glass over the whole area. And unfortunately for me, I realised my mistake after I had done this. So all the other builder had to do was dig out channels of foam so he could lay up the bid tape either side of the stringers, but I had to remove all the glass before I could do that. So I spent a few days researching the best way I could do this without damaging the foam underneath, whether it be sanding, application of heat, or something else. Overall, the best method seemed to be applying a controlled amount of heat over the area and gradually removing the glaze of glass. So I decided to go with this method. This was mainly to avoid trying to sand each layer away at a time without damaging the foam underneath. So what I decided to do was use the bits that you cut out for the main spar, which you can see here, and using my digitally controlled heat gun, I gradually applied different amounts of heat to the area to see what I needed to be able to remove the layers of glass without damaging the foam. I have to say it worked quite well, although it was time consuming, and I'm not sure how much time I would have saved by doing this instead of sanding. So after I was confident that this method was going to work, I used it on the sidewalls to remove the glass and then cut the channels of foam out to allow the bid tapes to go either side of the stringers. I'm more than happy with how it all turned out, although I'm sure it would have been better if I just read the instructions properly in the first place and didn't have to do all this. And I estimate that I probably cost myself another week's worth of work. So while I was repairing the area, I was thinking a lot about how I could have made such a mistake. And I thought back to when I was building the RV7 and compared the instructions for the Cozy to that. And I realised that the RV instructions are more of a checklist style, whereas the Cozy is just paragraphs of instructions, and it is possible that you could miss something. I definitely prefer the checklist approach of the RV7s, and I assume this is similar with lots of kit aircraft. So with the help of a family member, we put the Cozy instructions into ChatGPT, and we had it convert the instructions into a checklist, which is much easier to follow in my opinion. I'll be using these checklists over the next chapters, and if they work a lot better, I'll probably put them online for everyone to use in the future. Okay, so moving on from the mistake now, I had a comment on one of my previous videos about shaping foam and how this is accomplished. So I'll try and give a bit of a description of how it's done here. So I'll use the spaces for the fuselage sides as an example because that's in recent memory. So as you can see here, you cut the general shape of the spaces, and to achieve the taper on the upper and lower edges, what I did was mark the upper and lower limits of the taper. So using a sanding block, you remove the foam right up to the upper and lower limits, and then you basically sand out the bulge that's in between the two. What you end up with is a flat taper, and it looks great. Instead of using sandpaper and sanding blocks, I highly recommend buying some permagrit tools as well, as these are invaluable. So lastly, I'd like to mention the 3D printing tools that I made in the previous chapters. There are certain tasks in the instructions that have you make up wooden spacer blocks and things and clamping blocks, and what I decided to do was to draw them in Fusion and 3D print them instead. I found that this is a better way to achieve exact dimensions, light parts, and you can print multiples of anything you needed. I've since posted a few of these tools on Thingiverse, and I'll put a link to the description below as well. Okay, well this brings us to the end of episode 4. I hope you found it entertaining and informative. As always, comments and questions are more than welcome, and keep an eye out for episode 5 coming soon. Thanks for watching, happy building and safe flying.